Hello, it's time for me to talk about another one of my finished 3D prints. This print was painted in acrylic, as all of my prints are, and it was finished off using a pretty wide spectrum of model finishing materials. The model is called Castlegate 2, and it is by Kijai, and I will provide a link in the description below to where you can download the free STL. There will also be a link below to another video I did detailing all of the paints and tools and model materials that I use on my models, so that you'll be able to check that out if you're interested in more details. So let's get to this model right here, which I really do love. In fact, this one's quite dark. Just looking at it, I'm thinking I might do another one just to see how I can make it different again. um, anyway, after the print came off the print bed, I cleaned up some bits of plastic around the edges, a few baubles and stray bits of filament. I used my flush cutters and diamond files to kind of clean that up. There was a bit of filament in the top of the the bridge thingy here too that I had to clip out, but that's probably down to my printer, nothing to do with the STL. This particular designer makes models with a lot of detail, and it makes them an absolute dream to paint. This one is the more detailed of the two castle gates. I did a video on the other castle gate as well, which is a much different model, but still castle-y. This model even has bricks, which, you know, the paint gets into, and it just makes it a lot of fun to paint. It's like this model was made to be painted, not just printed. And yeah, so after the model's all cleaned up and ready for paint, you've got to prime it. You can use a spray primer, or you can just brush on a layer of acrylic paint. It doesn't have to be special primer, or the word primer doesn't have to be anywhere on the bottle. It's just a layer, a thin layer of acrylic paint. You don't want to put on a really thick layer and obscure any of your little ridges and details. Unless, of course, you have a really choppy print and you want to kind of fill in some of those ridges with paint, then maybe go thicker. And there's a lot of little tricks you can do with paint to make your well, disguise your print if it's come out not so great from the printer. Anyway, so after the model's printed, you've got to let it dry, painted rather, primed. You've got to let it dry for, I would say, at least a day. It's very tempting to want to jump into just painting the whole thing, but I really try to pace myself so that I don't ruin anything, because it needs to be quite thoroughly dry. So the next thing you always do with a model is you block in your base colors. My base colors were mostly gray, the same color I primed it in, and the houses I did kind of in a dark brown, and the roofs are purple. Then once your base colors are dried, then you can start adding in washes. I usually do multiple layers of washes on my models, because one isn't good enough. I think a lot of people who paint models tend to stop too early. Like they've got the right idea and they've got their colors blocked in, but they don't do washes or dry brushing, and that just adds so much more dimension. So it's a really good idea to keep going, even if you're sick of looking at it, because you've been spending so much time on all the little surface area bits and whatever. So to wash it, I did a dark brown all over. Extra washes I applied into these little crevices and things to really get the shadows in. Even here, I made it extra dark so that you can really see that that's a quite a deep shadowy area. The houses, I just washed really the whole thing with the same dark color, and the other side's completely different. But yeah, there's lots of little crevices here, and on the bricks, I also tried to kind of outline a few of them. You know how, like, on a brick wall, there are some bricks that stand out more than others, so, yeah, I just kind of highlighted a few bricks with the wash, and, then after that was good and dry, I went in and I applied my dry brushing highlights, and that just brings out the ridges. And I did that with a lighter gray, and I did that all over the castle, and especially in these steps here. You can see that I did a quite a lot of a dark wash in the steps, and then you just highlight those tips to really make them stand out. Um, and these little details up in here and the kind of the wood beams. Those are all highlighted. Then once the highlights are all dry, you can go back in, do more highlighting, do more washes. There's no wrong answer. You just do it until it looks correct for you, and you don't want to make the whole thing too bright or too dark. This one is quite dark, but it kind of suits the model. Um, the last thing I did was the details. And I used a bit of copper just to kind of go in here and just highlight the tips of the little turrets and the windowsills. Just I always use, well, I usually use a metallic paint in my models somewhere. The thing is, I really like the way that it catches the light from, you know, far away, or up close. It just makes the whole thing prettier. It may not be very realistic, but I really like my metallics. It's kind of my thing. I highly recommend that you play with metallics, play with glow in the dark paint, play with all paints. Don't spend a fortune on your paints, but do play with paints. It's great fun. Also, mix your own colors wherever possible. You don't need every shade of paint. Mixing paint is quite easy. So once all my highlights were in and it was good and dry, I went in and I applied all of my grass. This is a mixture of nail flocking fluff, which is like for manicures, and I've never seen it done, but it is a thing for nails. Makes a great base, like, of short grass and kind of like moss. Um, After that, I applied a mixture that I made of a couple different colors of static grass. I have some really light stuff and some darker stuff, and I just kind of mixed it together and applied it here and there to make kind of a mixed bag of foliage around the castle. And you can see all the different colors, kind of not the greatest light, gotta admit. That's slightly better, isn't it? But yeah, it's just kind of some light green stuff and some darker stuff. I will also have a link in the description of my video to give you my kind of my favorite supplier at the moment for this stuff. Very reasonably priced and sells in small quantities, which is like perfect for this sort of thing. You don't want a huge bag of stuff you're never going to use if you're just using little bits. Then once, excuse me, once the grass was all in, I went in and I added bushes with clump foliage, which is another type of model finishing supply. And I had these little bits of clump foliage that were actually speckled with purple. I don't know if you can really see it quite clearly on my blog, which I've also linked to in the description. You'll find some still pictures of this castle to give you a better idea of all the fine details that are in here. But yeah, the purple flowers were already in there, and I kind of made them into vines here and there. And like here, you can see a good viney bit. Just to give the castle that little bit more kind of character. It's a bit overgrown. It's all right. So yeah, once all the clump foliage was in and those little purpley ones were in, I actually was thinking about painting these paths. And originally, something I forgot to say was I did paint them brown, these paths. I figured they're kind of the kind of paths that you'll have horse-drawn carriages coming across, and they're not paved. They're quite grooved into the model. I've even seen some people paint them as water, which looks quite cool. But once I'd finished the model, I gave it all of this texture, and it looks quite dry, and there's all these different kind of textures around the model. The shiny paths looked incorrect, and it really bugged me. So I finished the model. I was happy with the model, but I wasn't entirely happy, and then eventually I caved, and I added in this rough, it looks like sand, but it's actually cork. It's like ground up cork. It's another model supply model material that I got from the same supplier just to try out, and it feels quite weird, but it looks fantastic. And I just did all the little paths with the cork stuff, and then it didn't look quite right because it was a very uniform color. So I went back in and I applied some darker brown washes to make it muddy in the middle, kind of like the edges are dried because nobody's walking on there. Every model kind of tells a story as well, which is cool. So yeah, I muddied it up, and then it looked correct, and it was fine, and I was pretty much happy with it. And I'm still happy with it. And this model is really cool. There's just so much character, so much character in it. And as with the other castle, these little stairs go all the way down. It's quite cool looking. Um, and it prints supportless, which means there's not a load of stuff to pull off and ways for your model, well, more ways for your model to fail in the printing part of it. So yeah, that's all. Um, Bye.